Verhei. Joining me as always is FO Editor-in-Chief Aaron Schatz, one of our favorite FO contributors, Bryan Knowles. We are here to talk about a bunch of football data coming out of NFL Week 3. We got a lot to say about the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are legitimately so far one of the best teams in the league, which still sounds weird to say. A lot to say about Lamar Jackson, who is one of the best quarterbacks in the league, which does not sound weird to say. And a lot to say about the Chicago Bears, who are just weird on their own terms. Before we get into that, I do want to mention, we all love fantasy football. Aaron, Brian, you guys are big fantasy football fans, right?
One of my matchups this week, baby.
Well, hooray. That's great news. And the only thing better than fantasy football is wagering someone else's money, which brings me to Underdog Fantasy. You, the listener, can play on Underdog Fantasy with us and double your first deposit up to $100 with the promo code OUTSIDERS. Even with NFL best ball season over, Underdog has other user-friendly game formats to spice up all their games. You can try their Battle Royale, a 6-round best ball style draft with simpler chances to win than traditional daily fantasy sports sites, or try their Pick'em games where you can wager on players' chances to go higher or lower than their projected stat lines, even in states where traditional prop betting currently is not available. Underdog is the fastest growing fantasy site around. You can join the fun over at underdogfantasy.com or download Underdog in the App Store. And remember, use promo code OUTSIDERS now to double your first deposit up to $100. And that's really just free money when you think about it, and there's no reason not to do that. Now, thanks to Underdog, we are here to talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars, who there was disagreement about this team coming into the year. Our projections for the AFC South as a whole were pretty mid, I think we can say, but we didn't expect the Jaguars to finish in last place. We thought they'd be contend in a weak division, and some were skeptical, some were optimistic. I'm going to go ahead and go on the record here and say this. In the notes here that our good friend Brian has prepared, he's sure to mention that Aaron was talking all off season about the subjective prediction of why the Jaguars may be even better than our projections said. And Aaron was doing that. That's true. Aaron was going all over the country, all over these interwebs, telling everybody about reasons to believe in Jacksonville. But for the record, when we put our FO staff predictions out in black ink in publishing and on hard paper, if that was still a thing, the only member of the FO staff to predict the Jacksonville Jaguars to beat their FO projection was, in fact, this guy, yours truly. So that's 1 for 1 for Big Vinny this year.
Yeah, yes. I wish I had gone more Jacksonville. I wish I'd had a little bit more faith in my subjective case for the Jaguars. I went with Denver instead.
Yeah.
Who is, by the way, Denver is 2-1 and in the top 10 DVOA, but they're not as exciting as the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't think, hey, Russell Wilson's not quite sure what he's doing, but the defense is playing well, is not as exciting a story as, hey, Trevor Lawrence turned into Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I had the Jaguars earning the first overall pick in the draft in those subjective predictions. So I'm doing really well so far through 3 weeks.
Well, this Jacksonville team, of course, they have Trevor Lawrence. They have Christian Kirk. They have James Robinson, who's had a bunch of big plays this year. And you put it all together, and we are looking at, I believe, the best Jacksonville start of all time through 3 games.
Yes. By DVOA, this is the best Jacksonville team through 3 games we've ever measured. They're number 2 right now behind Buffalo. They had never been higher than 5th after 3 weeks before. And of course, like the next best Jacksonville team through 3 games was the 1999 Mark Brunell squad that went 14-2 and dismantled Dan Marino in the playoffs. So things are looking good for the Jacksonville Jaguars right now. And I think that you could argue that the Colts are down, and so beating up on the Colts maybe wasn't as good as it looked like. But we were all high on the Los Angeles Chargers, and they destroyed them.
I know the Chargers were missing, Justin Herbert was clearly less than 100%, and there was a bunch of players out for that game. But it's not like that was a close game they won on a field goal.
No, they destroyed them from minute 1 to minute 60.
They were the better team for 60 minutes, and they manhandled the Colts, and their only loss is a loss to Washington, which doesn't sound good. But if you watch the game, they probably should have won that game. I think I said the same last week. They had a bunch of mistakes in the red zone, drop passes, and then self-inflicted errors that probably cost them that game. But that's done. I know there's a lot of things here that the Jaguars have accomplished. They have not done in a long, long time.
Yeah. So the Jaguars were on an 18-game road losing streak before they managed to win this one. And I know all the jokes about the Chargers' home field advantage and so on and so forth.
Yes, that's right. Does this count as a road game?
It's a neutral site.
The last one on the road is in a stadium which isn't used anymore. They beat the Oakland Raiders in the last game in Oakland.
I didn't think about that.
And this was actually the first time that was the first time the Jaguars had won on the West Coast since 2004. So they have 2 West Coast wins since 2004 now, which is absolutely astonishing. Trevor Lawrence has started his career with 9 straight road losses, which tied the NFL record, one set by Peyton Manning. So that usually, if you have a list with Peyton Manning, that's a pretty good stat to be on. Not quite so much this time.
I think it also shows that if you lose 9 road games in a row and you are not the first overall pick, you were getting benched.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you get a little bit of a leash here if you are, touted as the best prospect in a generation.
Yeah,
it's their largest road win since Week 15 of 2001, which was a 33-3 win over Minnesota Vikings, which is probably the final straw that got Denny Green fired that season. The Vikings were down to their third-string quarterback Spurgeon Wynn, who is not someone I expected to mention twice today, but Wynn was also one of the quarterbacks the last time the Jaguars won back-to-back games by 20 or more points. That was in 2000 when they beat the legendary Vince Tobin and Dan Brown Arizona Cardinals 24-10, and the 2000 expansion Browns 48-0, who were quarterbacked both by Spurgeon Wynn and by current Jaguars head coach Doug Peterson.
That's fantastic.
That's how long Peterson was the active quarterback the last time the Jaguars were this good.
It's been a long time since the Jaguars were a team we could talk about. And they, we came into the season saying we felt the entire AFC South was down and we thought there was a chance that no team in the division would have a winning record. And I realize it's only been 3 games, but, even if you only consider how the Jaguars have played so far to be like 20% of how good they are, which is what we do with the Dave ratings, like this team now we give them a 71% chance of making the playoffs. Like the Jaguars are the AFC South favorites. No question about it, based on how they've played so far and the fact that we had these teams all sort of grouped together in the preseason. And because it makes sense. This isn't like last year where Carolina started 3-0 and you were like, okay, it's nice the defense is playing well, but come on, Sam Darnold, really? Like this makes sense. Hey, Trevor Lawrence finally got it is a storyline that makes complete logical sense.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone else would have been surprised if the Jaguars were like on pace to go 7-10 or 8-9 and possibly win a down division. The fact that they're destroying everyone and that Lawrence has taken this huge second-year jump, that's the storyline. That's definitely something you can follow. Also, the massive improvement in coaching from getting rid of Urban Meyer, who may well be the worst coach of the 21st century at this point. Going to Doug Peterson has been great.
I love the stat you have. Doug Peterson has now tied Urban Meyer on the Jacksonville Jaguars head coaching wins list.
Yep.
With 2. Onward and upward. So the last thing to talk about here is basically what the future holds for this team. We know, Washington, the Colts, and the Chargers. It's the most difficult schedule anyone's played this year, I think we can say. It gets much harder this week. They travel to the Eagles. But then I'm looking at this next slate of games. It's Houston at Indianapolis, the Giants at home, the Broncos at home, the Raiders at home, all in a row. And then at Kansas City. So this is a team that's looking at, what would that be? 2, 3, 4, 5. 7-2 going to their bye, maybe 6-3 if I'm doing my math right there. So this is a team that looks like it's going to be in good shape going into their bye in mid-November.
Yeah, I mean the Jaguars do currently have the 32nd ranked pass schedule, in part because those teams have had to play the Jacksonville Jaguars. No, that's not all of it. The Bills, who are number 1 DVOA, only have the 23rd week pass schedule. But even though the Jaguars have been beating up on teams which haven't really gotten things together, they've been good enough, and that schedule coming up is weak enough that they might have this division more or less packed away before Thanksgiving at this rate.
One of the things I'm doing in the DVOA commentary article this afternoon, which I usually do after 3 weeks, is looking at schedule strength the rest of the way based on Dave, not based on DVOA. So based on a combination of how teams have played so far. I am. I'm on Ethernet. Okay.
Well,
apparently, we're having audio issues.
All right, I'm going to take over for 2 seconds here. We'll just, I think we've talked about the Jacksonville part for a bit. Aaron's audio it's not great, but it's been worse. But anyway, we're going to move on to Lamar Jackson, as now my throat is having audio issues. Lamar Jackson, the MVP frontrunner right now, it looks like, unless you're really holding that loss to Miami against him, which seems kind of strange considering the score. But Lamar Jackson has done a bunch of things we've never seen before, and now he's doing things we have never seen before from Lamar Jackson. I believe the updated numbers, he is second among quarterbacks in passing DYAR behind Patrick Mahomes, first in rushing DYAR by a mile, nearly twice as much as Josh Allen. And there's a bunch more things here Lamar Jackson is doing that, like I say, even Lamar Jackson has never done before.
Yeah. Lamar Jackson is the first quarterback since at least 1950, which is how far back these stats go, with at least 3 passing touchdowns and 100 rushing yards in consecutive games. He's actually, there's only one other player who's done it with 3 passing touchdowns and 70 rushing yards, and that's also Lamar Jackson, who did it twice in 2019. He's the first player in the Super Bowl era to have at least 10 passing touchdowns and 100 rushing yards for the first 3 weeks. He is just destroying all these historic benchmarks. He's doing things we haven't seen since the 1940s, when football was barely even recognizable compared to today's numbers. He's currently in the top 5 in both passing touchdowns and rushing yards. That hasn't been done since Frankie Sinkwich of the 1944 Lions, back when the league had 10 teams.
Show me another podcast discussing Spurgeon, Wynn, and Frankie Sinkwich today. I don't think you can do it.
Yeah, not going to get anywhere, not going to get that kind of detail anywhere else in the internet. I'll tell you that right now.
So let's see. I think you mentioned this. First player in the Super Bowl area with 10 plus touchdowns and 100 plus rushing yards through 3 weeks. If you're not aware, Lamar is currently leading the league in passing touchdown throws, and is he top 5 in rushing yards? I think maybe top 10.
Yeah, he's currently 5th in rushing yards. Yeah.
Yeah. Total DYAR, he's got about 20 DYAR lead over Patrick Mahomes right now, which this early in the season is basically tied. But he's incredible. And there were questions all year. They traded away his top wide receiver. Who's he going to throw to? And the answer is whoever you give him. He'll make it work.
The fact that he's doing all this with Devin Duvernay as like his most productive receiver is astounding. It's not like they traded away Hollywood Brown. They got worse theoretically at the receiver position this offseason, and he's still doing it. And Jackson looks more comfortable in the pocket than I think he has at any point in his career this far. I mean, obviously he was MVP in 2019, but a lot of that was the running, and enough passing to make things to flow well. He looks much improved as a passer this year, despite having arguably worse options to throw too. It's a development I love seeing, because when Jackson is on, I'm not sure there's more quarterbacks that are much better to watch than when Jackson is actually going full speed and improvising and running up the middle and everything.
Right. But it's more than just the improvising. Our old buddy Doug Farrar did a great breakdown. You can find him on Twitter and look it up. And like you say, he's a pocket passer. And if someone tells you that Lamar Jackson is just a runner and can't throw, you need to just stop talking football with that person, because they do not know what they're talking about.
There were a couple of plays on Sunday where, like in the second quarter, where the rush was starting to get to him, and he missed Mark Andrews on a couple. And then he righted the ship, and in the second half, he was fantastic and hitting everybody.
So yes, we are all big believers in Lamar Jackson. Do we think right now of Baltimore is now, and they probably were coming in, but the favorite in that AFC North? I think it's pretty clear. Well, Cleveland is surprising, but that's another issue.
Cleveland is surprising, but Baltimore has been the better team overall. And I mean, I thought they were the favorite coming into the season, and I still think they're the favorite in that division. Absolutely.
But now, again, the injury bug is beginning to hit them. I think they're down to their 3rd string tackle.
They were down to their 4th string left tackle.
Dear God.
That seems improbable after last year. They, basically everyone got hurt for, half the season. The fact that they're still having some injury problems, that's truly astonishing. And the fact that they're still winning despite that is a very good sign.
Yeah, they were scheming things. Like there were a couple of plays where Falele, the rookie left tackle, who's the fourth stringer, had to hold up against Dietrich Wise and definitely did not. But for the most part, like they were giving him help, or they were, having Jackson move to the other side. Like it didn't turn out to be such a huge, big deal in the passing. And Falele was making some holes in the running game too.
Looking at Baltimore's upcoming schedule, I have not looked at what's coming up in Week 4 yet at all until right this show as we're recording this here on Tuesday morning, where I am in the West Coast. But Buffalo Bills at Baltimore Ravens this Sunday. There's a game I think I might watch. I might tune into that one. That sounds fun and important.
Yeah.
I think have a Sunday night game hosting the Bengals the week after that, which maybe the Bengals' last chance to challenge the Ravens this year. And I see at the Giants, the Browns at home, at the Buccaneers, at the Saints. That's a pretty tough road to hoe. They get the bye week in Week 10 there, early November. But
Baltimore's
got a lot of
going to get a lot harder, but everybody in that division has a hard schedule. So it's actually the easiest schedule of the teams in that division.
Ravens Bills is going to be a fantastic game because if anyone else is, if you don't think Lamar Jackson's the hottest quarterback in the NFL, you could argue that Josh Allen is the hottest quarterback in the NFL. I mentioned that Jackson's the first quarterback in the Super Bowl era to have 10 passing touchdowns and 100 rushing yards the first 3 weeks. Well, Josh Allen is the second player to have 9 and 100. He's 1 touchdown pass behind Lamar Jackson right now. The record coming into the season was 8 touchdowns and 100 yards by Donovan McNabb and Steve Young. So, I mean, Jackson and Allen, they're really the model of what the quarterback should be like in the 2020s. And now the mobility in the passing game too. That's why, you trade up for. I'm coming from San Francisco side of this, and a lot of criticism about, you had Trey Lance run up the middle and he broke his ankle. Well, that's what the Ravens and Bills are doing. That's where you get the value out of someone like a Lamar Jackson or a Josh Allen. That running ability, they run up the middle all the time, and it sucks when someone gets hurt. But you can see the question is, why were you doing it? Well, because it's really good when it works. That's why you do it. But Jackson and Allen might be the top 2 finishers in the MVP race this year.
Yes.
Not finishing in the top 2 in the MVP race, Justin Fields, the Chicago Bears. So this is, we're going to talk about Fields here as a player, but I think a lot more of this has to do with the Bears as a franchise. And if you've not read my quick reads piece up right now at footballoutsiders.com, cheap plug, it's all about Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears and how they are doing anything they can to avoid putting the football into the air. Let's keep one hand on the ball at all times, preferably 2 or perhaps even 4 if we can just keep a long handoff and just form a big cage and just master the field. I didn't even find this stat until this morning. I wish I'd gotten this into the story, but the Chicago Bears as a team have officially 45 pass attempts. 45 times they have thrown the ball and attempted to complete it. There are 30 other teams that have more pass completions than the Bears have pass attempts. The only exception is the Carolina Panthers, who have their own issues. But we're looking at a run-pass ratio, the likes of which we have not seen since the 1970s. And when you adjust it for era, because we're talking about the Buffalo Bills putting the passing as much as they can, and most teams are trying to win by passing as much as they can. And the Bears are going hard the other way. And when you compare their run rates to the era they are playing in, they stick out like no team ever has before. They're a complete anomaly.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to dig up some numbers just to find some historical context for this. They have 23 completions through the first 3 weeks. 23 completions is a somewhat subpar game nowadays. That's the fewest number of completions through 3 games in the 21st century. It's the 3rd fewest since the 1978 rules changes, which opened up the passing game and made let receivers not get clobbered downfield. The only ones that are less. I looked at all the teams with 30 or fewer completions. Half of them are from 1978 and 1979, when no one knew what to do with these new rules changes. The Bears are down there with the 78 Buccaneers, or some of the strike teams from 1982 who it's their first 3 games, but there were 6 weeks off between that. That's going to throw off everything there. The Bears are just terrible. They're 45. The Bears aren't terrible. That's the problem. The Bears are 2-1, despite all of it.
That's the thing, is they're not terrible. They've played good defense. They've run the ball. They've played bad opponents, right? So, I mean, they've definitely taken advantage of playing in a mud storm and playing Houston. And they're 2-1. The dam is not going to break this week because they're playing the Giants. They're playing another really bad team.
Fields is on pace to throw 255 passes in 17 games. The record, the fewest passes by a 16-plus game starter is 328. He's on pace to break it by over 50 pass attempts. Something has to give. Either Fields has got to throw more or the Bears are going to stop winning. I cannot imagine that in 2022, a team is going to win by, not just by rushing and defense, but by insane levels of rushing and defense. It doesn't make any sense.
There is part of me as kind of a sick, twisted football fan that hopes, we get into this later part of the season around Thanksgiving and December. And I don't know if you guys have ever been to Chicago. I hear it can get windy and cold that time of year. They may run more later in the year.
Yeah.
And what happens if Justin Fields starts every game and still doesn't qualify for the passing tables?
It's conceivable. It's just conceivable.
Now, we should say this, by the way. We should mention this is not necessarily a critique of the Bears' play calling, because when they do try to pass, it's horrible.
Yeah.
Fields is dead last in completion rate, and despite never, ever, ever throwing the ball, he's top 10 in both interceptions.
They're at a negative 47.4% passing DVOA, which is bad. If that holds up, it would be the fourth worst in the DVOA era, behind the 92 Seahawks, the 2005 49ers, and the 2004 Bears. Yes, this is not yet the worst passing offense in Bears history. It's just the fourth in.
Just wait till we get to the backups, baby. That 2014 was running Craig Krenzel out there. Just wait till this team's stuck with their backup quarterbacks and see how bad it can get.
And Justin Fields is a highly drafted first-round pick in his second year. We should not be talking about this about a highly drafted rookie quarterback in his second year.
And we all loved it. We loved the trade up to get him. We thought it was a great idea. We thought, oh my God, the Chicago has finally got a chance to have a real pass offense. And I mean, there's just nothing.
Jay Glazer is reporting the Chicago Bears management is really sold on quarterback Justin Fields, which is the sort of thing you say when no one thinks you're really sold on quarterback Justin Fields.
You quoted his DVOA. I'm going to give some more basic stats here. His NFL passer rating right now is 50. That is, of course, the worst in the league. Second worst, Mac Jones at 76.2. Keep in mind, passer rating does not include sacks. Justin Fields has been sacked on 18% of his dropbacks. Daniel Jones, second worst at 12.4%. So, how far can a team go getting 0, 0, 0 from the passing game? It's fascinating.
He still flashes, but it's only when everything breaks down and he's forced to improvise. I mean, I watched every second of that horrible monsoon game in week 1, and all the Bears' big plays were, the offensive line is broken down, Fields scrambles around for 5 minutes and throws the ball 60 yards from an uncovered guy. It's nothing that he's doing good is repeatable. Nothing that he does good is planned. It's just all kind of happens when Fields has to make something happen randomly, because it's backyard sandlot football when he succeeds. I don't know how you build on that. I don't know how you build from that. And it looks like the Bears don't know how you build from that either, considering the state of their receiving core.
And then you mentioned the I think it was the 2004 Bears with Craig Krenzel. And this whole let's run as often as we can seems to be a Bears tradition. When I looked up the history of run-heavy teams for their era and based on whether they were winning and losing, number one was the Bobby Douglas Bears from 1972 when he ran for 900-plus yards, a quarterback rushing record that stood forever until Michael Vick broke it. The early Jim McMahon Bears showed up on the list. The Jack Concannon Bears in the Gale Sayers era in the 1960s. So these Bears have a long history of just avoiding the pass at all costs. It's fascinating how that turns out. That's different quarterbacks, different coaches, different eras of the league. It doesn't matter. The Bears just can't throw.
It's not good when Sid Luckman still holds a lot of your passing records.
Luckman also, the Bears' history of passing is basically Sid Luckman and nothing.
Jake Cutler was a really good Bears quarterback by Bears quarterback standards.
Yeah. best modern quarterback, Jay Cutler. That's a depressing sentence in and of itself. Oh boy. The thing is, it does not feel like it's getting better. That's like, Fields in the second season. Things, it's still young. There's still plenty of time. But it feels like the Bears are actively trying to hide him at this point, and that's a disaster of a first-round pick.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. But to be fair to these Bears historically, it's not just the quarterbacks. They have never had anyone to throw to. Their leading receiver all time is Walter Payton, who is a running back. Second leading receiver of all time is Matt Forte, who is also a running back. If you go by receiving yards, the leader is Johnny Morris, a wide receiver from the 50s and 60s. They haven't had anyone of note since then. Alshon Jeffrey for a few years, but not enough to, 5,000 yards is all it takes to lead these Bears in receiving yards, and no one's managed that since the 60s.
It is like statistically improbable that any one franchise would have so much bad luck at the quarterback position and so much lack of success. I know that there's a philosophical thing. I know that that's a little bit coming from ownership. Like, we want to be, the monsters of the midway, want to play defense rather than run the ball. But you think just by sheer dumb luck, they would have stumbled into somebody at some point.
The whole point of the Fields trade was to not be that anymore. Like now we are trading up. We are taking a quarterback. We are going to build around a quarterback, not around our defense. Like the point of Fields was to not do that.
And they traded up for Trubisky before that. I mean, they've been trying.
You're trying.
And, it's just not working. They've been going every single possible direction here. Cutler was a trade. They've done everything they can do to try to find. They've drafted. They've traded up. They've traded down. They've tried running undrafted players out there. They tried running highly drafted players out there, and just nothing.
And it's for decades and decades. They reached out and got Eric Kramer. They drafted McNown. It's just been trying and trying. And their backup right now is Trevor Siemian. So I don't think Fields will be benched anytime soon. His job seems safe no matter what happens because it can't get any worse, right?
Yeah. So Danny Young asks in the chat, and don't forget if you're watching us live, please feel free to ask questions and chat with us. As a Bears fan, I'm wondering if the Bears should take another quarterback next year or try to fix the offensive line and wide receivers and hope. Well, at 2-1, they're actually currently in playoff position, so they're actually not in position to draft one of the top quarterbacks next year. If the bottom falls out and they're at 1 or 2, then I think at that point you have to cut bait on Fields, even though it's only been 2 seasons. But at the moment, they're winning too much.
If they end up picking 3, 4, 5 somewhere in there, and there's a great quarterback prospect available, which I haven't even spent a lot of time on the 2023 class yet, so I don't know. But if if one falls into their lap where they are, I think they have to take him. If they do end up picking somewhere around 20 or 25, which seems really optimistic, but if they do end up picking in the bottom half of the first round, let's say that, at that point, I don't know if they have the capital to make a move up to get a guy. So in that point, because to be fair, Fields is not out here playing with the greatest show on turf. Just receivers are batting any worse. The offensive line is getting worse. So yes, I think it's fair to say let's take the best offensive player available if they do end up with a non-premium draft pick. I think that's a reasonable strategy to go with. This guy was a highly drafted quarterback, 18 months ago, whatever it was. My favorite of the class coming out behind Trevor Lawrence. And to be frank, I guess you'd have to take Mac Jones next, but Trey Lance and Zach Wilson have not exactly been huge successes. So he may be the third best quarterback in that class, and we'll see. So they would have no choice, I think, but to give him a third opportunity in that situation.
I mean, and if Sam Darnold could have gotten a second team in a 4th year starting, then Justin Fields absolutely deserves that because
that is an excellent point.
Fields' highlights are far better than anything like Darnold was able to do. We need to find a way to make those highlights a more regular thing, and that might require a full offensive overhaul. But he's still got talent. You can see the talent when he plays. It just isn't not there on a play-to-play basis.
Just cut out the negative plays, of which there are many, and that is a heavy load to bear. But we have seen worse quarterbacks than Justin Fields get second and third chances. So, like I say, unless they just happen to end up in the top 5, I think they'd probably just try to get him a weapon, get him more help, and hope and pray he develops into what most of us thought he would be. Now, you have a great bonus question here.
I do. I have a trivia question, seeing if either of you can get this one picked out. We've been talking about the Bears and how they've been historically low volume in throwing. Well, we actually had a record set this week for high volume of passes. For the first time in NFL history, a quarterback has passed for more than 150 attempts in his team's first 3 games, so averaging more than 50 attempts per game. That's never been done before. The record was 150 with Frank Tripucka of the 1962 Broncos. Do you know which quarterback now has set that NFL record? Their team has relied on him more than any other quarterback in NFL.
I do know this, but it's because I work on quick reads, and so I'm studying this kind of stuff every week, and so I know this, but I kind of cheated, so I don't want to give the answer.
Yeah, I know, but I want to see if any of the viewers get it.
All right. Yeah, so there you go, viewers. Who is currently leading the NFL with 155 pass attempts, the most ever through week 3 of the season? I presume for team's first 3 games, because
yes,
that is a ton of passes in 3 games. So I would guess that has never been done before.
Yeah, it's a record. The previous record was Frank Tripucka with the 1962 Broncos at 150. The 62 Broncos were terrible and had to throw all the time to try to catch up.
They showed up, by the way, in a list of the most pass-heavy teams in that Justin Fields article. So there you go.
And the previous NFL record, if you don't want to count early AFL stats as being worth anything, is Drew Bledsoe with 149 for the 1995 Patriots. That was his, I think, his second season. He was a Pro Bowl as a rookie. 95 did not go very well for the Patriots, all things considered. We're getting some good guesses in the chat about it. We have Kirk Cousins, no. Tua, no. Stafford, no. Derek Carr, no. Josh Allen. You guys are all naming.
Someone unusual is correct, though.
Yes. You guys are all naming good quarterbacks. And I suppose you could argue this player was good. I mean, he's got a first-round draft pedigree. That's, that's something we're talking to. He has had playoff success, significant playoff success in his career.
True.
In 155 pass attempts is you have to say that's an elite amount of passing attempts to have in 3 games. I mean, you have to have some arm strength to pull that off.
I'll give the clue that we'll hopefully get someone will get it. Yeah, there we go.
The answer is Joe Flacco of the New York Jets currently leads the NFL on a record-setting pace of pass attempts. And it hasn't been too bad. Here's the thing. I mean, are we sure Zach Wilson's going to get his job back?
I was going to say Flacco has 155 pass attempts, and that might be it.
Yeah.
Because Wilson is supposed to be back this week.
Yeah, and I realize there's no benefit to playing Joe Flacco all year in 2022, but I'm not sure he's not the better quarterback right here and right now.
I mean, you have to find out if Zach Wilson is the better quarterback. So no matter how good Flacco's doing, you can't start him. But I think there's a very solid chance he'll have the higher DVOA when the season is over.
He did last year.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't know that off the top of my head. I'm going to look up where Flacco ranks in DVOA. Raw numbers are like okay. They're not.
They weren't great last week, but he had a very solid week too.
I mean, the whole season numbers. Yeah.
He was so solid week 2. I had a Flacco and Wilson stack in my daily fantasy this week. I did not win many daily fantasy games this week.
No. He's not doing as well as I thought. He's 25th in DVOA and DYAR, negative DYAR. So at that point,
might be better. Yeah,
it may be better, but it's not good enough to warrant benching the youngster for the guy who's has no future. He has a presence, but he has no future in this league.
Honestly, it's not good enough to justify throwing the ball 155 times in 3 weeks either, but that is a different story.
But when you're behind by 20 points all the time, that's what you do. Mm-hmm. All right, we got a collection of stats and numbers from around the league. As you noted here, Aaron Donald picked up his 100th sack this year. It was one of his most amazing sacks. And I say this as someone who lives in Seattle, watches a lot of Rams games. Has written 2 Rams chapters for the ALMANAC and watched every Rams game of the year for that purpose. And I've seen a lot of amazing Aaron Donald things. This was way up there with amazing Aaron Donald highlights. When he throws an offensive lineman out of his way, Kyler Murray, maybe the quickest, shiftiest, hardest to tackle quarterback in the league, turns his back and runs away, and Aaron Donald ran him down. I screamed. I couldn't believe what I saw.
human beings should not be able to do what Aaron Donald does.
No, I'm not sure there's actually bones in his body. He's 290 pounds of pure muscle. And it's all fast twitch muscle too. Completely insane.
100 sacks. He joins John Randall's the only other primary defensive tackle to have 100 official sacks in his career. It's absolutely a crazy number. He'll be in Kent in about 30 seconds after he retires.
I think so.
Which as a 49ers fan, I hope is very soon. I have seen enough.
Allegedly, he thought about doing it last offseason and then changed his mind.
We were all hoping. Everyone in Arizona, Seattle, San Francisco, everyone hoping that, great career and walk out as a champion. Everything's good.
You've done everything you can do, Aaron. It's time to, here's a mojito, take your seat on the beach. Enjoy your time in the sun, and just don't ever put on a helmet again because we're terrified of you. We are utterly terrified of you. And it was funny because that was the history sack, but then I'm sitting there thinking about how amazing Aaron Donald is, and then if he's the best defensive player I've ever seen. And then just as a reminder, there have been other great defensive players. A few minutes later, J.J. Watt got a sack too. Like, well, okay, that guy was awfully good too. maybe not in 2022, but in 2000, what would it have been 2015
and 2016? He was
he was also a force of nature.
They might. It is theoretically possible that we could see a Hall of Fame class in 5 years, led by Tom Brady, Aaron Donald, and J.J. Watt, which would be that would be up there with some of the best classes ever in history. I mean, challenge that group.
You're not wrong. That's a lot of MVPs and Defensive Player of the Year awards and records and Super Bowl rings and whatnot. Very impressive. Speaking of impressive, Cordarrelle Patterson. Let's talk about a late bloomer. Guys drafted, close to a decade ago by Minnesota as a wide receiver / kick returner. Bounces around a lot, never lands a role on offense. He's the best kick-off returner, not kick returner, but kick-off returner in league history. And then he lands in Atlanta, and they say, you know what? You're a running back. And it turns out he's a really good running back. He's your leader in rushing DYAR. Through week 3, he was the top overall running back in week 3 if you include his receiving data. And this Atlanta team, which is and they're 1-2 with a win over a bad Seahawks team, but for a lot of people thought they'd be the worst team in the league, and they are certainly not been that.
They're bringing the offense. They're getting killed on defense, but they're bringing the offense.
This year's good-bad team. Like last year, how the Lions, put challenges into a lot of people, and they lost most of those games, but they did threaten them and make them have to work harder than you'd expect to go on a losing team. That's kind of who the Falcons are this year. You should be able to beat the Falcons easily if you look at their roster, but they're playing. Their offense is going. Patterson's looking good. Drake London has looked very good through a couple games. We got Kyle Pitts involved more this week, he was kind of mysteriously absent because he had 4 defenders on him at any given point over the first 2 weeks. So, the Falcons are kind of becoming fun to watch, which is probably their best case scenario for this season because they're not going to be good, but fun to watch. I will take it.
Marcus Mariota is, do my math right here, third in the NFC in both passing DYAR and passing DVOA. It's a weird year, and a lot of quarterbacks we thought were going to be good have not been good so far. So after Jalen Hurts, the NFC, you quickly get down to the Jared Goff, Geno Smith, Marcus Mariota level. And then those washed-up schlubs, Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers.
That was a weird year so far.
Yeah. It's been a weird year so far.
Tampa Bay is something like 26th in offense.
Yeah.
To be fair, all their star receivers are hurt. So this is something we expect that to get better over the course of the year. But that was a weird game watching Brady and Rodgers in a duel. That's how we say this last week. Because that was – I can't remember another game with 2 such highly hyped quarterbacks having such little success offensively. That was the game of the week. Everyone's like, it was on the national game, and just there was nothing there.
What if Rodgers retires too? Rodgers, Brady, Watt, and Donald. That's not impossible.
Yeah. Let's have Gronk come back for one game to give him too.
Sorry, what was that?
Let's have Gronk come back for one game so he can join that class too, and then we'll just have no need even to vote that yet. You have your 5 guys already ready to go, and you can just move along.
Yes, Cordarrelle Patterson, 31 years old this year. Last year was 618 rushing yards as a career high. This year, he's almost halfway there already with 302, which is the second best of his career. So, he's been this secret weapon that the Vikings and Raiders and Patriots and Bears all missed out on. And it's the Atlanta
Patriots. The Patriots were the first team to use him as a running back.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. They 228 yards that year as a runner, which was a career high at the time. But even then, he was not their lead back, obviously. And Atlanta's getting more out of him on offense than anyone ever has before.
Yeah, he was a below average but not terrible receiver. It turns out if you have that skill set as a running back, that's pretty good.
Here's a question from Sebastian, fantasy question. In a full PPR league, Justin Jefferson and Kareem Hunt for Najee Harris and Michael Pittman. Which side wins? I'm going to say Justin Jefferson and Kareem Hunt.
That's where
I'm not the biggest Najee Harris fan because that offensive line has problems.
Yeah.
Harris gets volume, and that's strong on his point. Like Kareem Hunt's not going to get anywhere near the volume Najee Harris does.
No.
How much does that volume help you if you're getting like 3 yards a carry?
Yeah, and your quarterback's not getting you to the red zone 5 times a game either. So it's thumbs down on Najee, and by the same token, this last Sunday accepted, the Colts have not been setting the world on fire.
They didn't set the world on fire this Sunday either. To be quite honest, I mean they themselves.
Yeah, so that Najee Harris, Michael Pittman size is a thumbs down for me, and Justin Jefferson is a huge thumbs up. So that I've talked myself into liking the Jefferson Hunt side of that trade, and frankly by quite a bit.
Yeah.
All right, let's go through some more of these fun random stats. I like that Brian pointed out the scores in Denver on Sunday. Padres 13, Broncos 11, 49ers 10, and Rockies 6.
Yeah, that was a fantastic Sunday night game, wasn't it?
Barn burner.
If you like punting, fantastic punting.
I was missing most of the game. I had dinner out with friends, and every 15 minutes I'd check my phone, and I thought the refresh function wasn't working because no points were coming up. Like it can't still be 7-5. That can't be right.
The Broncos were the first team to win a game with exactly 1 touchdown, 1 field goal, and 1 safety since the 2008 Vikings over the Lions in the Dan Orlovsky intentional safety game. Of course, Orlovsky.
Unintentional safety, I think. I mean,
excuse me.
Wander out the back of the end zone safeties.
And frankly, Orlovsky's was still funnier. Garoppolo was at least under pressure.
Yes. Yeah, Orlovsky his response on Twitter was great, though. He was
freedom!
This is the greatest night of my life.
Yes.
Yeah, Orlovsky and Mark Sanchez getting redemption on Sunday. Maybe they can stop being the butt of jokes for at least a little tiny bit here. Because, of course, the butt fumble is getting at least temporarily replaced by the butt punt.
I haven't heard. Is that Dolphins player okay? Because that would hurt really, really bad.
After the game, it's Trent Sherfield. He tweeted out, "I have a W tattooed on my cheeks."
Yes. Okay.
I believe that Charmin reached out to him and asked him if he needed anything soft. That's good advertising. That's good marketing right there.
Glute humor. Nothing like it.
Oh man.
So let's see what we got here. We have other running backs having big years. Nick Chubb is on a roll, not a slight second place to Cordarrelle Patterson in overall rushing DYAR, but he set a benchmark this week.
Yeah, since he entered the league, he now has 24 games with more than 100 rushing yards, passing Derrick Henry, who has 23 in that time period. So how quickly the best running back in the league title kind of turns, because Henry does not look like the same Derrick Henry he was even 2 years ago.
No, although he looked better against the Raiders than he did in the first 2 weeks.
Although most players tend to look a little bit better against the Raiders than they look against the competition so far. Yeah. But, Chubb might be taking over that title as, at the very least, as the guy you'd least want to have to tackle.
Yeah. And Henry showed up under top running backs this week, and I was floored. And most of it was as a receiver. He had a couple of big catches, and it was not a huge week for running backs across the league. But the reports of his death have been greatly exaggerated. So we mentioned Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen's an MVP candidate, and even though Mahomes had an off week, he's way up there too. But Jalen Hurts, these Philadelphia Eagles doing things through the air on the ground that no one has done before, including Lamar Jackson.
Yeah. Hurts is averaging 300 passing yards and 50 rushing yards a game. That's never been done before. So, if he keeps that up, that's an MVP quality season. I think I looked this up. The top 4 odds for MVP right now is Josh Allen at plus 300, Jalen Hurts at plus 600, Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes at plus 700. I mean, before the season,
I would rather have Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes than Jalen Hurts right now.
With the odds, I'm taking Mahomes.
Yeah, I mean, Mahomes. Before the season, both Aaron and I had Mahomes as as the best bet, because basically, until proven otherwise, it's Patrick Mahomes. Over 3 weeks, both Jackson and Hurts, I think, have proven otherwise. They've been significantly better than Mahomes. 3 weeks versus.
Mahomes still number 1 in DYAR, passing DYAR. He doesn't have the rushing success the other two have, but he's been still great.
Yeah, but a lot of that is that week 1 game.
So
Mahomes was not great. Certainly not great this past week.
That's fair, and nothing record-setting against the Chargers in week 2. That's fair.
I would expect, though. Yes, I would expect that Mahomes would be better with the rest of the season. And it's certainly over Hurts. I mean, Jackson's got MVP credentials to back him up as well. But yeah, I mean, I'd still take Mahomes at plus 700. It has only been 3 weeks.
I will also point out another stat we have written here. Patrick Mahomes in his career is 45-2 against teams that score fewer than 26 points. And both losses are to Indianapolis. That's random.
Weird. Weird.
They've got his number. What wasn't the mid 2000s round robin that the Patriots always beat the Colts always beat the Broncos always beat the Pats?
Yep.
Yeah, so now the Colts always beat the Chiefs. Just random stuff happens sometimes.
The Colts record is so weird. You lose to the Jaguars in Jacksonville, who I know they've been good, but still Jacksonville. You tire the Texans and you beat Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. I mean, that is one of the strangest. If you had told me before the season they would have gone 1-1-1, I would have gotten all the results wrong. I would have flipped every single one of them.
So elsewhere, among fun random football stats, there are only 2 players this year who have had a gain of 30-plus yards on a running play and a gain of 30-plus yards on a receiving play. I think I said that right.
Yes.
And they know each other quite well. It's Amon-Ra St. Brown of the Detroit Lions and his brother, Equanimeous St. Brown, the coolest named brothers maybe in NFL history.
And I'll remind you, there's a third brother at USC who I think is coming into the league next year, which is Osiris St. Brown.
Oh, excellent.
Here's hoping the St. Browns have a very, very long, successful career at the top of the league, because these are the kind of names I want to be saying every week.
There was about 10 years ago, there was a lineman. I was at Hercules, like Mata'afa.
I think it was a fullback, Ma'atafa'a or something. Yeah.
Something, yes. But he was named Hercules. He had a brother named Samson and a cousin who had another godly name. And I went over through the Verhei cousins, and it's Vinny, Joe, Mike, Matt, Ricky, and Tony. That's not nearly as exciting.
No.
My family needs a Hercules immediately. Hercules, if he ever tried to kick a football, might be trying to match what Ryan Stonehouse is doing. Ryan Stonehouse is averaging 57.1 yards per punt, which is almost 6 yards more than the current record set in 1940 by Sammy Baugh, the great passer, punter, defensive back of the that is the Neolithic era of the NFL, actually.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that's Stonehouse, a rookie, having a great start to his career. And he's getting lots of opportunities to prove it, because the Titans have been outscored 57-7 in the second half of games this year. So Stonehouse has there's a fairly large sample size on those 57 yards per punt.
And I don't know this.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know this, but this is something I looked at last year, and it's something, frankly, I'd like to either study myself or find someone else who's done this. But there is a huge disparity in where punters punt on the field. Like Michael Dixon of the Seahawks, his average punt came from like close to his own 40 because Pete Carroll punts in opposing territory so often. So he was very often not getting a chance to just punt the ball as far as he could. And I remember I was looking this up, and Arizona was in last place, and their average punt came inside their own 20 because they never punt unless they have to. And that kind of swing can affect your punt average. I'm wondering if Ryan Stonehouse is just constantly punting from like his own 12-yard line, and maybe that's part of this record.
That's a good point, because part of
it. Sure, absolutely is part of it. Absolutely.
Yeah, part of Sammy Ball's record is this is 1940s where punting on third and occasionally even second down was a viable strategy. Punt it back there when they don't have a returner back there. You're pinned deep, you can do that. So
especially when your punter was also your quarterback, which is what Sammy Ball was.
That too. But when your quarterback is Sammy Ball, that means the other team's quarterback is not Sammy Ball. He's something much worse. We can go ahead and punt to that team. They'll punt it right back anyway.
I don't have this number written down. I'm trying to remember the exact things, but in Washington's games, and I believe it was 1941. There was I think it was an 8% chance that any given play would end up in an interception by Sammy Baugh, no matter who had the ball. Whether it was Baugh throwing it or Baugh intercepting it.
Yes.
Interception Sammy Baugh was the most common play. Oh, I love old-timey football.
Right, so moving on to slightly younger quarterbacks. The Tua Tagovailoa, I spoiled my own stat here, but
one more good Tua stat before we go.
Yeah.
Yes, 16 years, last 16 years of the NFL. Oh, Brian's editing it as we speak. There we go.
No.
NFL teams are 2-106. 2-106 when they are outgained by 275 yards or more. And since I already spoiled this with the intro, the 2 wins were Tua and the Dolphins against the Rams in 2020 and Tua and the Dolphins against the Bills this week. So there's the key for the Dolphins. Let the other team outgain you by at least 275 yards. You will go 2-0.
Definitely a repeatable strategy. We've shown they just repeated it. Perfect. Tua for MVP.
Okay, Brian, I'm looking at your false endpoint theater one, and there's a lot of minutia in this.
Yeah, don't worry about that. I love it because the 275 yards stat itself is kind of a. Obviously, I picked 275 because it's not 250 or 300. So you got to be careful when looking at stats. And someone says something. Cooper Rush is the first UDFA undrafted quarterback to win his first 3 starts and throw for 750 yards in those starts since Kurt Warner. Because as we all know, we can all just rattle off the names of people who throw for 750 yards in 3 games. That's obviously a very important statistic that means literally anything at all and wasn't picked to specifically block Taysom Hill from being on this list of 3-0 undrafted starters. Gotta be careful with stats sometimes, people. Use stats responsibly.
Yes.
Hercules Mata-Alpha, by the way, was a defensive end for the New Jersey Generals of the USFL this spring.
Good for him.
So there you go. He's still kicking around. Well, I think that is all we have for this week, unless there's some other.
That's our show.
That is our show. We were close to an hour. That's pretty good. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate it. Thank you for all your questions. It helps us put together a good show. It's always good to know people are enjoying what we're doing here and taking part and being interactive. Aaron, Brian, thanks again for being here. Hey, let's do it again next week.
Let's do it next Tuesday. Yes.